Ciao e benvenuti! In today's lesson, we start introducing the present tense of Italian regular verbs by focusing on the conjugation of verbs ending in are. A worksheet with the exercise included in this video, plus an extra exercise, is available to download. Please check the description box for the link to the PDF file. Italian verbs are classified according to the ending of their infinitive forms. The infinitive form is the basic unconjugated form of a verb, that is, the verb as it appears in the dictionary. In English, the infinitive form of a verb is usually indicated with two words, to plus verb. In Italian, the infinitive form of a verb consists of only one word, and it has one of three possible endings. Depending on their infinitive endings, Italian verbs are divided into three groups or conjugations. Let's take a look at them. In the first group, we find verbs ending in are, like imparare, to learn. The second group consists of verbs ending in ere, like leggere, to read. And in the third group, we find verbs ending in ire, like aprire, to open. Infinitive verb forms like the ones we've just introduced cannot be used as main verbs in a sentence because they're basic unconjugated forms. For example, in the sentence Io imparare l'italiano, the use of the infinitive imparare doesn't make much sense, and the same thing can be said about the English sentence I to learn Italian. The verbs imparare and to learn are not acting as main verbs here. But if we conjugate the verbs imparare and to learn and say Io imparo l'italiano, I learn Italian, then the two sentences become clear because we have a direct link between the action of learning and the person doing the learning. All the above groups include both regular and irregular verbs. Most importantly, each group has its own conjugation pattern. The conjugation for Italian regular verbs follows this pattern. Subject, which can sometimes be omitted depending on the context, plus verb root, that is the infinitive form minus one of the verb group endings are, ere or ire, plus the verb ending, which varies depending on the group the verb belongs to, the subject being singular or plural, verb tense and verb mood. Let's look at a practical example and translate the sentence Maria learns into Italian. We start with Maria, the subject, and then focus on the verb. To learn in Italian is imparare. To conjugate it, we first remove the verb group ending are. We are now left with the verb root, impar. Then we add the appropriate verb ending, which in this case is a, the third person singular of the present indicative. This way we have formed a meaningful sentence, Maria impara. Now that you know the basics of Italian verbs, let's learn how to conjugate the present indicative of regular verbs ending in are. Here is the conjugation of the present indicative of regular verb imparare, to learn. We start with singular forms. Io imparo. Tu impari. Lei impara. Lui impara. Lei impara. Now the plural forms. Noi impariamo. Voi imparate. Loro imparano. As I mentioned in other lessons, Italian subject pronouns can often be omitted. However, I advise you to use them when learning verb conjugation because they do help memorize the correct endings for each grammatical person and number. Here's a list of other common regular verbs ending in are. Arrivare, ascoltare, ballare, cantare, comprare, lavare, lavorare, parlare, portare. When conjugated, some regular verbs ending in are can show spelling changes. This happens, for example, with verbs ending in care, like giocare, and in gare, like pagare. This also happens with verbs ending in iare, like mangiare, where the e in the verb root is unstressed. And it happens in verbs ending in iare, like spiare, where the e in the verb root is stressed. To explain the spelling changes, let's look at the present indicative of these verbs. We start with giocare, one of the regular verbs ending in care. First of all, we remove the verb group ending are and we get the verb root gioc. To get the conjugated forms of this verb, we now need to add the endings for the present indicative. But we must pay attention to consonant chi in the verb root gioc. Because chi in this case is pronounced as hard k, we must make sure to keep the same sound across all conjugated forms. For the first person singular, we simply add the ending o and we get io gioco. When we get to the second person, however, adding the ending e would change the sound of chi, because we know that when consonant chi is paired with vowel e, we get the sound ch, which is a soft sound. So to maintain the k sound, we must insert consonant h before the e ending. This way we get tu giochi. If you are unsure about how Italian letter sounds work, check out my lessons on the Italian alphabet, where you'll find detailed explanations. Moving on to second formal person lei, by adding the ending a, we get lei gioca. We do the same thing for the third person singular, and we get lui gioca and lei gioca. For the first person plural, we need to use the same trick we used for the second person singular, because adding the ending iamo to the verb root gioc would change the k sound into ch sound. So again, we need to add consonant h before the ending. This way we get noi giochiamo. The conjugated forms of the last two plural persons do not present any spelling changes. So we have voi giocate and loro giocano. I'll repeat the present indicative of giocare without interruptions now. Io gioco, tu giochi, lei gioca, lui gioca, lei gioca, noi giochiamo, voi giocate, loro giocano. Verbs ending in gare, like pagare, are conjugated in the same way as verbs ending in care. The root of these verbs ends with consonant g with a hard sound g, and this must be kept across all conjugated forms. So the present indicative of pagare is io pago, tu paghi, lei paga, lui paga, lei paga, noi paghiamo, voi pagate, loro pagano. Let's now look at the spelling changes in verbs ending in iare, starting with mangiare, to eat. As we've done with the previous verbs, we remove the are ending from the infinitive form mangiare and we get the verb stem mangi. Here the root presents an unstressed e because the stress falls on vowel a, mangi. Bear this in mind because it is the presence of e that determines spelling changes for some conjugated forms. Let's look at the conjugation. For the first person singular, we add the ending o to the verb root and we get io mangio. In the second person singular, we have a spelling change. Because the E in the verb root is unstressed, we remove it and then add the E ending for the second person. So we get tu mangi. The second formal person singular and the third person singular do not show any spelling changes. So we have lei mangia, lui mangia, lei mangia. For the first person plural noi, we proceed in the same way as for the second person singular tu. We remove the E from the verb stem and then add the ending iamo. We get noi mangiamo. The last two persons do not display any changes, and we have voi mangiate and loro mangiano. I'll repeat the whole conjugation once more. Io mangio, tu mangi, lei mangia, lui mangia, lei mangia, noi mangiamo, voi mangiate, loro mangiano. Now let's move on to verb spiare, to spy, which belongs to the group of verbs ending in iare. But unlike the previous group, these verbs have a stressed E in their verb stem. After removing the are ending from the infinitive spiare, we get the verb root spi, where E, being the only vowel, is stressed. Again, the presence of vowel E at the end of the verb root determines spelling changes, but only for the second person singular and first person plural. So for the first person singular, we have io spio. For the second person singular, because the E in the verb root is stressed, we cannot remove it as we did with the verb mangiare. So we keep it and then add the E ending. The resulting conjugated form ends with double E. Tu spii. Moving on, the second person formal is lei spia. The third person singular are lui spia, lei spia. In the first person plural, we remove the E in the verb stem. The reason for this is that when we add the ending iamo, the stress of the conjugated form will not fall on E, but on A. Noi spiamo. Finally, the second and third persons plural do not present any changes. So we have voi spiate, loro spiano. Let's go over the present indicative of spiare once again. Io spio, tu spii, lei spia, lui spia, lei spia, noi spiamo, voi spiate, loro spiano. Now follow the example in the first row and then write down the present tense forms of the regular verbs ending in are listed below. You can pause the video to do this exercise and then resume it to check the answers. You can also use the worksheet linked in the description box. There you will also find a second exercise. Answers to both exercises are available in the description box. And that's all for this lesson. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Grazie e arrivederci!